So, hello, dear fellow time travelers, hello and welcome. We're happy to be joined by numerous participants, companies, and eminent research institutions from all over the world. A warm welcome to our distinguished guests, keynote lecturer Phil Balagtas and Ivica Mitrovic, moderator of the Q&A session, which will take place after the lecture. It is my great privilege to welcome you all to our event entitled Hello Futures. Our main focus is, of course, the future. Its plurality, to be precise. We will focus on the endless possibilities of many different futures. These are driving lessons for time travelers, so to speak. We spend our lives traveling through time. Learning to plot our course is a useful skill. I would like to ask Tina Pezdirc Nograšek, the head of the project, for a short introduction. Tina, the virtual floor is yours.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina Pezdirc, and I'm managing projects at the Regional Creative Economy Center. We have established the center to support the creative economy at the regional level. It has been established in 2012 based on the numerous studies that presented the high potential of creative industries in the capital city of Slovenia, in Ljubljana. I will just give you a short introduction to understand why we invited Phil Balagtas and Ivica Mitrovic today, and what are future challenges in this aspect. We strongly believe that, of course, creative industries have a high potential to link up with other industry sectors and to boost economic as well as social development by empowering innovation processes with creative inputs. In a transnational cooperation collider network, COCO for CCI project, we connect the best of two worlds, as we like to say, the open mindset and innovative approaches of the creative industries on one hand, and the experiences and technology-driven power of advanced manufacturing on the other hand. So, talking from the experiences, people working in the creative sector are often asking questions like, where can I get access to new technologies and materials? Or who is even interested in my know-how and solutions? Or often ask question, how do I sustain my creative business in the future? On the other hand, we address also companies looking for answers like which tactics are appropriate to cope with digitalization, or how can we optimize and innovate production processes, or often, how can we develop concepts to deal with future challenges? And in a way, trying to answer all these difficult questions, we've decided to provide various services and activities to raise awareness for this cross-sector cooperation and to connect companies from creative industries with advanced manufacturers. So the project partnership has developed tools to initiate and facilitate cross-sector links. And in the next months, we'll start with different matchmaking formats with advanced manufacturing companies applying open and innovative methods. In addition to that, we'll provide a program to train facilitators who will implement an extensive online and hopefully also face-to-face training courses in 3 dimensions: mindset, technology development, and future trends. And I think that today's lecture by Phil Balagtas is a perfect introduction to the program we've planned in these 3 dimensions. It will be accompanied by the workshop that Ivica Mitrovic will hold in February 2021. So if Phil's lecture will provide an introduction to the methods, tools, and selected examples of forward-looking best practices, Ivica's workshop, in a way, will be a perfect platform to test these methods in practice. So hereby, I invite you to find out that the future isn't about the one future you expect, and to discover valuable tools and concepts that build future-focused mindset and will enable you, of course, to adopt the strategic visioning. So thank you. This is all from my side. The word back to you, Barbara.
This brings us to our main event, a keynote lecture by Phil Balagtas. Phil has been a practicing visual and interaction designer since 2001 and has experience designing across a variety of devices and platforms within non-profit, retail, advertising, and enterprise software organizations. He's currently an experienced design director at McKinsey & Company, working with a variety of industries to transform and enhance their digital businesses and strategies. He's also the founder and organizer of the Design Future Initiative, which organizes the International Speculative Futures Meetups and the Primer Conference in the US and Europe. An educator and futurist, his events bring together designers and futurists from all over the world to teach and share strategies for designing for the future and the ethical challenges around emerging technologies. Without further ado, I give you Phil Balagtas.
Thank you. Great, well, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you're dialing in from. Again, my name is Phil Balagtas. I'm an experienced design director at McKinsey & Company, or McKinsey Design to be more specific, and again, the founder of the Design Futures Initiative, DFI. And I do live in San Francisco, California, but today, for the next 6 weeks or so, I'm on the East Coast of the United States in Virginia with my parents, spending some time with my parents. But you know, as of yesterday, this was San Francisco, September 9th, 2020. As you know, the California wildfires have been raging throughout the state and have created a smoke cloud that is sitting right above the cloud layer above the city. And all day yesterday, and probably persisting on to today, it looked like it was 4 a.m. all day long. Fire season is a thing now. I hate to start off so somber, but this is also another signal that climate change is real, and it is also due to climate change that this has become a persistent issue that we're dealing with in California. I bought my first mask earlier this year, pre-COVID, to deal with the fires, not the virus. So I luckily had a mask once the pandemic hit. But let's go back about 11 years, and I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I am a designer. I got my undergraduate degree in print graphic design. I was pre-med before that, but I dropped out of medical school because I got C's in anatomy and figured I probably wouldn't be a very good doctor. But when I graduated, I became what was known then as a web designer. I was designing websites in Flash. I don't know if some of you might remember Flash. And as soon as I graduated, I had my own little consultancy, and I was doing microsites and e-commerce sites for the music industry. Then I worked for some government nonprofit agencies. Did a little work on kiosks, and I'll show you that in a second. And then I got my master's in design at a college in San Francisco. And then I worked for GE on industrial internet, so just applications for reading data off of jet engines and power plants, that kind of thing. And then in 2017, I joined McKinsey doing digital consulting, helping businesses transform digitally, taking advantage of data and building digital tools, and also transforming their cultures and teaching them design thinking. So let's go back to 2009. And when I was working at a startup in San Francisco, I just moved to San Francisco. I packed up all my bags in Virginia, and I said, I want to go to California, and I want to work for a big company and do more exciting stuff. And this was the company that I worked for. The company itself was called Zoom Systems. They built the machine. This looks like a giant vending machine, and it was, but they called it robotic retail. I was in charge of that little tiny interface there on the right side of the panel. I was the web designer there because all that really was a full screen web browser. So I designed that interface. Sometimes I did the videos. It was a startup, so you wear many hats. And Best Buy was one of our concepts. Proactive skincare solution was sort of the breadwinner for that company. Very big in Japan. We had a huge network in Japan. And when I decided to go back to get my master's, I knew I wanted to do a thesis. So I found a university that had a thesis program. And I knew I wanted to do something that was focused on the future, but I wasn't quite sure what it was that I was interested in. And when it came time to pick my topic, I still didn't know what it was going to be. So I was working for Zoom Systems part-time and going to school part-time. And I said, send me to Japan. I'm going to go look at our proactive machines. I'm going to figure out, what we can do better, what's going wrong, how we can improve the user experience. And I talked them into sending me to Japan for a month. 2 weeks I spent in the field watching people use the vending machines. I had a translator. And I walked around basically. And then the other 2 weeks I spent traveling Japan, traversing the country. I went to Kyoto and Osaka and Nara. And before I left, I still didn't know what I was gonna do, but I found this vending machine. So this is, I think, yeah, 2009-ish. This was the first of its kind. This is a vending machine that had a full touchscreen interface. You couldn't see the products behind it, but at the very top was a web camera that was measuring who was buying drinks from the machine and when. So if you looked, and it was using machine learning, and it was learning. So if you looked like every other Asian man that was like 5'8" that bought coffee at 5 o'clock, if you fit that profile, it would suggest coffee. And it was just really profound for me to understand that the machine was intelligent and sort of profiling, facial profiling people and suggesting what they should drink. And I saw a lot of similarities with, what was happening with with Google and the algorithms for how you search the web and profiling people. And so the idea of data and identity became very important to me, and that eventually became my thesis. Through my research, I discovered Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby, who were professors at the time at the Royal College of Art in London. And they had a program called the Designing Interactions. And this was a project that I saw in the movie, a documentary called Objectified by Gary Leswit. And when I saw this was also another profound moment. These two objects in this picture are robots. And you can see they don't necessarily look like the robots we know today. It doesn't look like the Boston Dynamics dog, or it doesn't have eyes. But the provocation here was what might robots be like in the future, and how might they change, and how might we change our behaviors and interact with them? On the left is a robot that you had to stare into for a really long time for it to actually activate. The other robot, you might have to actually drag it around the room, and it actually needed a human companion to work with it. So this idea of like what interaction design meant in the future was so profound to me. These look like pieces of furniture and art. So that, along with digital identity, became another vehicle for my investigation. So I did a lot of probes, and I did a lot of experimentation. I stole a credit card reader off of the vending machine. Well, I didn't steal it, I borrowed it. I was working for the company. And I attached it to, I had a processing program, and I made it read any card that had a magnetic strip. I assigned colors and patterns to it. So if you swiped your card, you could see all these different colors and patterns and see the actual like visual signature of what cards meant, your secret digital identity on each card. Of course, it was just an art experiment, but it was another investigation of what that meant in the digital world. Another project, another identity visualizer that I built in MaxMSP was basically you just typed in your name, and it would do a very simple code scrape of the web and find all the pictures and images that are associated with a name. And literally, as you walked around the space, it was an installation. The images and text would literally follow you around the space, just like your data and your data footprint follows you around in real life. And again, it was just a probe to understand how people react to their data being visualized and taken out of the invisible and made visible. And of course, as for any thesis program, you want to come up with some kind of a framework or use a lot of big words. And I came up with a framework, which was just a fancy visualization for what I was doing. And the idea of data being measured through some sort of instrument like the vending machine or the web, and being tossed around in this categorization, reassembling, profiling in algorithms, and then be reorganizing on the other side to be used for some purposes. Maybe it was nefarious, maybe it's for something that was said to be benevolent, but it was used for some reason on the other side through a query. As on the left were the probes, like what's happening today, just kind of researching the topic. And then I did a couple of speculative projects. I did a film which was called Futures. This was a film about three people's lives in the future who were affected by data mediating systems. This character, Maya, was has a lost identity. She was sort of depressed, and she finds out about an archive where people's identities were being stored. And she goes there to find herself or find a new identity or capture a new identity to find, some sort of resolve in that. How that happened, what the archive is made of, how you actually capture identity, I didn't go too much into that, but I was more interested in the behavioral and psychological aspect of what if you could commodify or objectify identity? What might we do with it in the future? How would it change storage devices and what we know as libraries today or in the future, and how might we interact with it? It became an art film. If you dig around the internet, you might find it. It's very, very artsy, so don't expect a lot of, you might have to read a little bit of an explanation to understand what's going on. But I was a first-time filmmaker, and I always wanted to make a futuristic film, and I did it over the course of a semester. And I did a book as well, just as you're supposed to in a master's program, and you might find that online as well. But it's a catalog of my entire investigation through that period. And so through that, speculative and critical design became my vehicle. I was very, very interested in it, not just to imagine the future, but to really figure out how could we use it in a constructive way to figure out strategies for changing futures that we don't want, or towards futures that we do want. And that became speculative design. That became my passion. So speculative design, it has many, many definitions. And this is one way that I've defined it. And I don't know, maybe this sounds too academic to all of you, but it's a way to manifest possibilities and prepare us for the inconvenient challenges that may arrive and facilitate a more desirable, responsible path into the future. So how do we manifest the possibilities of what the future could hold and just avert ourselves from the futures we don't want? And we do this through the creation of diegetic prototypes. Diegetic prototypes is something, you know, that Dunn and Raby and the critical designers that came out of the RCA really used a lot. And a diegetic prototype is really just a prop. I don't like to use the word prop because it sounds like it's fake, but that's really what it is. It's a provocation, just like any other speculation that design creates. You speculate about design tomorrow. Anything is really a prop. But the great thing about speculative and critical design is it was built to kind of provoke those questions and ask the what if questions and really kind of design those immersive scenarios so that you can really think about what the future holds. Whenever we talk about futures, and some of you may have seen this, there's many versions of the futures cone, but this is the first framework that I like to start with. And it's not really a framework, it's not really a formula per se, but it's sort of a diagram of how the future has many possibilities. And I like this one. It's by Alida Drought in a book called What the Foresight, which is a personal futurist book. And it's just very simple. It's very simple. There's a lot of different versions of this, like I said, but you know, it's like shining a flashlight into the future. As you know, a flashlight has a cone, and the future is it's not one straight line. It's not completely predictable. There are many possibilities. And this is really just when we talk about this to someone for the first time, it sets that baseline that there are so many different futures that can arrive, and it's up to you to kind of create those futures or imagine them and decide how you might want to go and kind of widen that view of what the future holds. So speculative design, I think I've always thought it's best told through example. Everyone always asks me, how do you define speculative design? I've got that academic definition, which I don't always remember when people ask me that, but I usually just send them a bunch of examples from some of the work that came out of RCA to some of the work that's being done with like IDEO or Microsoft, which are also speculative pieces, maybe a little bit more corporate, a little bit more practical per se, but they're all speculations as well. So I'm going to show you a few examples here, and I'm starting off with one of my favorite ones by Aggie Haynes. This one's called Transfigurations. Now this is not a real child, but you can see the folds in the skin, and the provocation here is, what if we could, she was very interested in the skin and the body and how you might be able to manipulate the body and make it malleable for different purposes. So this child was designed to work in longer hours. The skins on the skin folds allow the heat to escape more. There's more surface area, so that the child can work longer hours in an environment that might be challenged with, you know, hotter temperatures and climate change. Again, a provocation. There's a series of these children or babies that were designed, and speaking to designer babies, really, and sort of the synthesis of that and the creation of new types of human beings. Something more recent is a project by Iwan Nowak called Incognito. So as you can tell, maybe these are devices. I don't know, you could call it a device. It's jewelry, basically, that you can wear to avoid or avert facial recognition tracking systems. So how could we, in a world much like today, which within a lot of the protests are trying to avoid that facial recognition and profiling, what's maybe an elegant way to do that? Very similarly, an elegant form of the mask or PPE might be something that looks like this. This is by Joe Doucet. You know, when this first came out, and it came out earlier this year, it really did feel speculative. But as we have started to see COVID really persist, I could see this more of a reality. At one point, at some point, it's not going to be speculative. This might be something that people are wearing, you know, within the next few months or so. Probably also paired up with a mask also. Another COVID response is by an agency called Production Club in Los Angeles. This is the raving suit. This is a really great project. You can find more details about the suit itself, but it's got speakers on the inside. It's got a breathing unit. It's got a place where you can actually hook it up to alcohol or drink through. It's like a straw, but it's a full-on basically spacesuit that you would wear at a club if you want to go and enjoy the club and feel safe. I don't think I would wear this at a club. I think being at a club and listening to music, part of that is like being with people and not being inside of a capsule. But again, it's a very interesting speculative concept of what might happen. Who knows? That might be the future of raving. Another older project is by Alexander Daisy Ginsburg. So this is called Synthetic Kingdom. On the left, you see a cup or glass made of keratin. And keratin is the protein in your skin and your hair and your nails that actually give it structure. And on the right is a pollution sensing lung tumor. So this is made of glass fabricating bacteria. And so it would glow red in the presence of toxic fumes, basically. And it looks very pretty, and it looks like almost like a piece of art. But again, so these are based on technologies that do exist today and could possibly be. But what if they were available? The questions around ethics, around whose cells were used to create these, start to arise. She has a really great quote, and I can't seem to get this quote out of the deck because I love it so much. But design, and not just necessarily speculative design, can set agendas and not necessarily be in service, but used to find ways to explore our world and how we want it to be. All design is futuristic in a sense, like I said earlier, but we can really utilize it to not only provoke and create visions and North Stars of the future, but also to actually set a new agenda and change strategies today. That's really closing the loop around this work. You can envision all you want, but if you can't change the present to go towards or away that future, that it's really for nothing. It's just really a creative experiment. And I believe that it's a lot more powerful than that. Another speculative project, 23andMe and Lexis. So I'm going to play this video. Let me just make sure that I can actually, the sound, we'll see how this goes, but hopefully it'll come through okay over the internet.
You. There are billions of you. But there is only one, you. So what if selecting your next vehicle focused on what truly matters? You. Introducing Genetic Select by Lexis, the world's first service that uses human genetics to match you with the car of your genes. Through a partnership with 23andMe, using their proprietary DNA genotyping, one small saliva sample will unlock your DNA, telling us where you're from, where you're going, and now, how you're going to get there. Within 48 hours, your handcrafted Lexus will be delivered to your driveway. Based on your chromosomes, everything from the model, styling, and performance capabilities will be crafted exclusively for you. Inspired by your favorite scent, a genetically personalized new car smell. If your DNA markers reveal a susceptibility to freckling, protective UV tinting. Even an enhanced windshield matched to your personal prescription. Genetically predisposed to high caffeine consumption? Enlarged cup holders. And best of all, operating your vehicle no longer requires a key. The perfect driving experience is in our DNA, because it's also in yours. Experience craftsmanship at the genetic level. Experience amazing.
So not real. It is imaginary technology, as it said, but it is speculative. But all of that technology does exist today. If we really wanted to create that car, we probably could do it. Maybe not in COVID era, would you want to be licking your steering wheel to start it every day, but we could probably do that. But it felt real almost, and that's sort of the power of speculative design and how you package it. These kind of vision videos can be very effective. Another project, this is a very recent one. This is a student, well, he's graduated now, Maiden Levy. This project won an award in the speculative design competition for Core 77 last year. This one's called Neo Fruit, and Maiden had imagined a new type of 4D printing of fruit. How could we reimagine or reconnect ourselves to the pleasure of food? And you can see some of these are made of silicone, but the yellow here is actual food that he put in it. And the images are really beautiful. I mean, some of them kind of look like, it definitely has a synthetic feel to it, but it actually worked. He actually put fruit in there and you could actually squeeze it and eat it. Now, again, the imagery is so seductive and powerful, and you would almost think that this is something real. I'm just going to play a little bit of his marketing video for you.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
So you can see he's got this really fun music. When I first saw this, I was like, wow, this actually exists. And I didn't actually know it was a student project, and I really believed it. But that's, again, a powerful way of kind of packaging it in a very contemporary, or at least now-ish state. So that, yeah, I was very impressed with this project and glad it won an award. But speculative design, futurism, however you want to label it, has been going on for quite some time. It's not a new practice or discipline. It goes back. Our architecture has been using it for quite some time as well, but even as far back as Apple. This is the Apple Knowledge Navigator, and if you don't know this, definitely go and check it out online. There's a video about this, and I'm not going to play the whole video for you, but basically this was a concept that was created around basically what looks like a tablet. And there's a whole story. It's about 7 minutes long, where a professor is talking to the tablet, and there's a little, you can see the little gentleman here who's speaking back, that's sort of like Siri. And he does the Siri, or gentleman, does things for the professor, like gets information, shows him maps, and communicates with another person across the world. So the Navigator, this prop, this diegetic prototype at the time, was a vision video. That's what they had called it. And in 1987, the internet wasn't available. Webcams at this level were not available. Touchscreen interface was not available. Assistants were not available. And again, it was sort of just tying into technologies that they kind of saw that would come into maturity, and they were able to identify that early enough and kind of create this vision around it. So it's a really great video. It's very low res when you see it, and it's a little bit campy, but it's really fun. Google, Nick Foster, who is part of the Near Future Lab, he's also the head of design at Google X, what's called X now, did this video back in 2016. And it's called The Selfish Ledger. And it's a series of vignettes, videos about the ledger, which is sort of like the AI, the big brain, and different ways that it could interact with humans. I'm sort of abstracting the premise of it, and I'm not doing it justice, but go check that out also. It leaked at some point, and it was meant to be an internal provocational design fiction piece, just to kind of be provocative and see like what could happen, what if we did this or that. But some of it was a little bit dark, and it was taken in the wrong way. And once it got out, and Buzzworthy got a hold of it, and some of these other tech news outlets, they thought that Google was really going down this path. One of the videos, I forget the name of it, but basically the ledger, the AI, needs to get a piece of data from its user. And to get that piece of data, it basically searches the user's preferences and buying choices and social media, and it basically it 3D prints this scale. It creates it in the fashion and form that it thinks its user would like and buy, even within its price point, and sells it to its user so that the user can actually weigh themselves on it and get that one data point of the user's weight. And starts to ask questions like, what if, the ledger was intelligent enough and could use that data, and how would it actually execute and mobilize to get different things that it needs to serve its own purposes, which eventually maybe its weight would be used to help the user buy something else, or to tailor to some other need of the user. Hopefully not nefarious. Another project that came out recently, I think this was last year as well, it's called Hyperhuman. So there's a series of projects within this that they created an exhibition, and this one was called the Belief Checkout. And so the provocation here is, what if tomorrow's supermarkets considered your values and ethics when automatically buying products for you? So how might we embed our vision, values, and beliefs into AI systems to confidently delegate tasks and enable the AI to eventually negotiate for you? And there's I think 4 different projects within the exhibition. They all had to do with the future of AI and how it could be assistive in helping people choose their careers or make shopping purchases, and a number of other tasks. Yeah, so as you can see, it's sort of sparse now, but a lot of different organizations are really trying to use future technology, not just to kind of envision the far future, but also the near future. I mean, I could see the Belief Checkout as being something that could be used today. Maybe you're not, at the supermarket in this era, with the cartons and looking like this, but you could actually see that living and breathing within your digital apps, like your Amazon. There could be like the ethical purchase AI that can kind of only show you products that are within your moral code. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what we're doing at McKinsey, and this is something we did recently, and it was sort of a response to COVID, and we wanted to really understand what does the next normal look like for patients. And there's a lot more to this. I'm going to only show you a few pieces of this, but it explores post-COVID crisis and the patient experience. And we sort of looked at it from a general patient experience, because there's lots of different types of patients, different types of therapies that are out there. And eventually this project led into a pan-tumor journey. So someone with an oncology journey, someone with cancer. But the original investigation, and we really employed the full foresight, and we didn't do a speculative design piece of it, but we did a little bit of strategic foresight. And I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But we looked at trends, several trends. We looked at trend libraries. We did some research on just news articles. There's a lot of people already talking about the next normal in healthcare. And we came up with some scenarios. And again, this is very generic because we sort of wanted to have a broad position on it at first. And there was no clients involved. The idea was to just kind of create provocations that we might actually take to clients and say, here's what we think the next 6 months to 5 years might look like, and maybe some things you might want to start thinking about. And on this 2x2, as you can see, this is actually the exercise is called the axis of uncertainty. And you basically create a 2x2 grid like this, and you come up with 2 axes of uncertainty, and you kind of create scenarios around those areas. So the 2 axes were new cases declining or increasing versus treatment or vaccine available. Really think about what's going to make patients feel comfortable with actually accessing new therapies, or actually going to the clinic, or getting out of their house, or really kind of engaging with the healthcare system. These are sort of social sentiments also, of like, how do you actually feel about what does the world look like outside of your house? And we felt like these were 2 things. And again, they're broad. We could probably be a little bit more specific around that, but we came up with these 4 scenarios that fit into those quadrants around what those different worlds could be. And so for this scenario, the 4th quadrant, which is cases are increasing, but the treatment or vaccine is available. And we might actually start seeing that in a few areas of the world. And hopefully we'll have a treatment or vaccine that's available. And we had a number of different dimensions here. We're looking at what's the technology landscape look like? What's the social landscape look like? What's the actual patient experience look like in this world? And it helped guide us into what those worlds would look like so that we could eventually start to create provocations or visions of systems or products and services that might need to live in that world, given that state. So like I said, it was based on the pan-tumor journey of a patient. And the outcome of this was we created a number of how might we cards. So this one is around satellite access points. So we had sort of the near and the far. Everyone that is sort of interested in the future within the COVID era right now, at least in the last 3 months, is how do I reopen? What does the reopening look like? So even though we wanted to do a very futures and speculative piece on this that looked at the next 5 years or 10 years of post-COVID, everyone really was interested in the next 6 to 18 months. So the next 6 months to 2 years. And we came up, as we mapped it to the pan-tumor journey, we looked at pain points that already existed for the pan-tumor journey, and then pain points that will exist due to COVID. So those COVID exacerbated pain points, we mapped out and we extracted those into how might we cards or how might we provocations. So you could actually take this and think about what if we had satellite access points for actually getting treatment. This is sort of based on something that already exists in Seoul, Korea, this like a vending machine that you can go to and get tested and get medication, and you can just walk up to it and you don't have to be indoors or inside or deal with a clinic. That's the near future. And then we also did it for the far future, well, far being 2 to 5 years. And this is some of the challenges you might face when you're trying to work with clients or kind of sell them on the idea of thinking long-term. You might have to do the near term. And this is literally what I've experienced over the last 10 years or so of trying to really advocate for this, is people don't really want to invest in the long term. They don't see their ROI immediately. And so COVID has sort of, again, instigated a need to look long-term. So that's good. Unfortunately, it's among the pandemic, and that's an unfortunate scenario and landscape to want futures, but it's happening, and thank goodness for that. So this is the 2 to 5 year provocation around autonomous care and treatment delivery. We think that remote delivery of treatment, telehealth, telemedicine will all start to ramp up very quickly. And we're seeing that all over the world now. But what's the next step beyond that? How could it be more autonomous? Could we send robots in there to do it instead of a nurse risking her life and her health, walking into a senior's home or a vulnerable patient's home to treat them with taking blood samples, or some of those things that robots can't do yet, but might be able to do in the future. We have another initiative, and again, I've been at McKinsey for about 3 years now, and I've been doing this work outside, and I really wanted to bring it in because when you're at a place that works with so many different companies, thinking strategically is part of the DNA, and we really wanted to try and see how can we bring speculative design and futures into the design group there to try and just build that toolkit, build that competency. And one of the ways, and I say this a lot. I say this phrase, free, cheap, and easy. What's a free, cheap, and easy way to test the idea? And it's based on Agile, to just kind of test the idea quickly and see if it has legs. And so one of my free, cheap, and easy experiments was to start a newsletter. And we started this a couple of years ago called Signals in Design. And it's entirely an internal newsletter. And unfortunately, I can't show you all of the work, but I can show you a slide or two from one of the newsletters. We're only on the 3rd version now, but we're doing sort of a post-COVID topic, and hoping that we can actually publish that and release it externally. We're trying to be very careful, but we have to be very careful about our position on things. And we also want to be very optimistic about it. We don't want to have like dystopic futures coming out and scaring anyone. We want to make sure that it's also it's dialed in right. So the second one was really based on a couple of different signals or trends that we were looking at. In the healthcare field, there's this idea of data interoperability, and that's the sharing of medical records, which right now are sort of sanctioned, and sort of there are a lot of like walls between who you can share it with and who has the rights and authorization to share it. It's not freely shareable like a lot of your social media data is shareable, or your shopping and browsing data is shareable online. It's very, very, very regulated. But what if those regulations start to minimize, and you could actually share and learn more about people on-demand intelligence, which is just next level AI, of AI being smarter, faster, serving on different levels, and being more autonomous. Recognition devices such as biometrics and other types of input devices to get data, everything from your Siri or your cameras or your Apple Watch, all that data being interoperable and sharing. And then biome and gene therapy, which we found very fascinating. So gene therapy right now is getting mature. You know, we understand the human genome pretty well. And, you know, companies like 23andMe are taking advantage of that, and their gene therapy is now, it's starting to modernize. But the biome, we're only now starting to really understand the connection between the nervous system and the biome and how connected it is. But the biome is a very, very complicated system. So if these four signals compounding start to evolve together, what might happen? And you can see on the screen just some data points that we grabbed just to kind of support the direction that we were thinking of, like, could this really happen? What is the level of investment that's happening out in the world around these things? And we had a couple of provocations, but here's just one of them. So we call it the omnibiotic restaurant. So what if restaurants had this stick that you would put in your mouth and measure your biome? Maybe it's connected to your genomics or in some way. It understands your chemical and biological signature, and the restaurant could actually create foods and diets that are tuned to your signature. What would that look like? Again, this is just a picture, completely just Photoshop rendered, but again, it's a provocation of what if we could do that? Is that something you want or don't want? So I'm going to talk about frameworks now. And again, these are just very basic frameworks, and they're the ones that I typically start with, but they're very simple. It's not the entire toolkit that speculative designers or Foresight or futures practitioners use, but they're ones that you may want to start with if you're just starting to explore these fields. And I'm going to use this term futures design thinking, but I swear I've gotten a lot of, I've gotten some scrutiny, not a lot, but it's some scrutiny around like, well, you know, design thinking is on its way out. Why are we trying to just modify it by making it future design thinking? I don't know. I just kind of thought it made sense. We've got design thinking now. We still need those tools. Why don't we add a futures perspective and start thinking long-term and use trends and really think strategically? Not that design thinking didn't think strategically, but so don't get caught up too much on the term. I'm not evangelizing this term, though I've used it in my talks, but really it's just sort of a fun way of thinking about these methods combined. So three approaches here. Strategic foresight, which is a very mature discipline. You'll find lots of books written about it. If you go and take an MBA, you might actually have a couple of electives in that, or full programs to learn how to be a foresight practitioner. But you know, there's a lot of analytical tools you use and looking at trends today and really analyzing what those trends mean over time. And then there's this framework called STEEP, which I'll show you in a second, which stands for social, technological, economical, environmental, and political dimensions or landscapes of whatever time horizon you're looking at. So what's the STEEP of 2030, or what's the STEEP of today even? And just kind of looking, dividing the environment into these different perspectives to understand what's going on at a macro level or even at a micro level. And then for speculative design, the futures wheel, or what we started calling it the implications wheel, is also a popular framework. And then backcasting is really the strategy part. I might be kind of tight on time, so I might have to fly through some of this, but this is just sort of another framework showing the process. It looks like design thinking, but there's a lot of different tools you could use. STEEP, again, is the what you're seeing here. The futures wheel, which is really about learning about the consequences or implications of an event or signal or whatever it is you're looking at. What's the direct consequence and what's the indirect consequence of it? And this is really a robust way of looking at your blind spots when you're investigating something. Backcasting is really just a sort of a road mapping exercise. I've sort of enhanced it by putting on top of a futures wheel. And so if you use it to look at multiple futures, you backcast into the present to see what's necessary for that future to exist or not exist. And each of these moments can be infrastructure or pivotal moments to get you towards those futures. And sometimes it's not a very clean way to get there, but at least you can map out the different pathways to get there. So Design Futures Initiative, that's our nonprofit 501c3 based in San Francisco, but we're a distributed team, completely volunteer run. No one gets paid. So people who are complaining about our ticket prices, I'm sorry, but we do have to pay for things. So we do the Primer conference, which again it's a speculative futures conference. We have it in the US and Europe. We pivoted to a full digital conference virtually this year in June. It was supposed to be physical in Atlanta, but we made the shift when we saw like South by Southwest canceling and a number of these other conferences canceling. Speculative Futures, I know there's a lot of names here, a lot of brands, but Speculative Futures was the name of the first meetup that I started in 2015. Which is really just on a whim and me just being passionate about speculative design and wanting to talk about it. So I started a meetup and that sort of grew. And then we also have our own programs. We do student advising. We have a kids program and we do mentorship as well. The community has grown quite a bit. In 2018, we had 6 chapters around the world. And today we have, this is outdated. We have over 53 and it's every other week we get a request for a new chapter. This slide is old, but it was supposed to be in June in Atlanta. This is our team in Madrid. We try to move Primer EU around to a different city. Each conference moves around to a different city each year. I don't think we're going to be doing a Primer EU in 2020. I think we're just going to wait till next year and hope that it opens up. So the third part, and I said programs, and we do kids programs. This is a program that we're very proud of and very excited about. So the Boys and Girls Club it's an organization, nonprofit in the United States that has clubhouses or recreational facilities for children at risk. So at risk meaning they're growing up in very challenging environments in neighborhoods with gangs and potentially drugs and the Boys and Girls Club gives them a place to go after school so they can be safe and they can learn music and there's basketball and there's swimming and they can just be in a positive, constructive environment. And we started working with them. The hypothesis was these frameworks are so powerful for thinking about future products and services and worlds, but what if we could actually use them to help kids identify life and career and social challenges and design better life pathways? How could we allow children with challenged lives to look at their future and find new ways around those things and realize that many futures exist. I don't have to grow up and be in a gang. I don't have to grow up and be a drug dealer, and I can actually choose and design a better life. So we started the program by doing some research, and we asked the kids on our first day, if you had all the money in the world, what's a problem that you would solve? And this 13-year-old boy said, I would solve the problem of racism because it's not fair. And this is a very powerful statement for us, for me, when I was working with this child. And I was like, I just didn't know what to say because for some reason, I just didn't realize the gravity of the impact that some of these issues have on these kids. Now, these are middle school kids, so 10 to 13 years old. And we want to understand what are the issues that are really affecting them and how do they think about the future and where are the gaps where we can actually help them with new methodologies. So we create a program and the Boys and Girls Club has these things called developmental assets, and they're sort of these values that they instill in their curriculum. And these are the 3 categories of values of really trying to teach them about caring and personal power and peaceful resolution and positive views of themselves. And we found out that when we asked them, when we were asking them a lot of questions about the things that bother them, they really needed some design thinking, problem framing, and really understand the problem, asking the 5 whys, role playing, and just getting a point of view from a subjective or objective perspective. And then we could teach them the futures, all the futures work also. And we've just added the mindfulness and gratitude layer as well, because now we believe that not only can we teach them to look at the future, but we should also teach them about how to be very thankful for what they have inside of them and around them. And we played games. We did a futures cone game with them where we had the children line up on different paths on the futures cone and tell us stories about the preferable and non-preferable future. And this was a creative experiment for them to surface issues. So we would say, okay, so what happens to this kid's life in 5 years? And someone might say, well, the parents get divorced. And I said, okay, well, how do you deal with divorce? Because sometimes you deal with problems that you can't change. And that was one of the messages that we really wanted to show them, that you're going to face problems. You have to be able to understand the problem really well, research it, investigate it, and navigate around it and plan a better future. And they were able to respond in very constructive ways without really being prompted. And we believe it was very successful. We talked to them about ethics. This is our ethics committee. The three kids in the front are our ethics committee, and then the rest of the class was society. And we debated on things like war. The problem with the autonomous car is if it hits, whose fault is it if the car hits the old lady or the child crossing the road? Who's at fault? Again, an ethical problem. And that ensued a really big debate. And we had a lot of really important discussions, and we realized that, and they realized that ethics is, and even though they didn't know that word ethics, we just used terms they might know, like rules or laws, that they're sort of a social construct. We decide and we define ethics as we believe are right or wrong as society evolves and whatever the state of our society's in, or whatever our current social values are. And that's our class. That the blue piece of paper is the contract. After one of these sessions, a few of these sessions, we said, okay, we want to make sure that these guys who have really understood it, and they can get into an agreement with us and really like live positive futures. And so we get them to sign. And we did these little activities to make them they're sort of fun, interactive activities, but it kind of brings this other layer of like, oh, I'm actually binding myself to this. I should probably like, really remember it and hopefully live by it. We won't know how much we've changed their lives. I think we really believe that it needs to be a constant process. It can't just be like a couple workshops in a year and suddenly like, they're all good. their lives are completely transformed. And that's what we're working on right now, is how can we continue to install that into different programs. The next version of this is going to be working with kids with disabilities. And we're looking at kids with sickle cell anemia right now in Atlanta. One of our partners is a designer at Atlanta, and her child has sickle cell anemia. And if you're familiar with the disease, you can be at risk as well. And sometimes you have to go into extended care programs in the hospital and be isolated from people because your immune system could be compromised. And so they are at risk, also at risk of depression, at risk of actual disease and actual terminal diseases. And how can we give them hope and use these frameworks to show the possibilities of what the future, no matter how long or short it might be, how can we actually do that to help them see that? Another initiative we are just finishing up is with the United Nations Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs. We ran a competition all month of August called Futuring Peace, and we asked for people to submit ideas for what does the future of peace building look like? Not peacemaking, which is sometimes associated with conflict and militarized action, but peace building, sustaining peace, post-conflict sustainment, peace sustainment, those kind of things, constructive things. If you want Foresight training and certification, our partner is KEDGE, the Futurist School. They are offering certifications now. There's a few other programs out there, but we partnered with KEDGE last year. And not only are we recommending their training certification, but we're building a design futures program with them, which is due to launch in beta by the end of the year. So this is a speculative design course. It's a 2-day course, which we are in the midst of designing, which will be connected to the strategic foresight ecosystem at KEDGE. And if you don't want to, go to the university and the RCA and take the full program, you can take this program as well. Here's some books. A lot of people like to take pictures of this slide. If you're interested in everything from foresight to futures, to speculative design, speculative everything, the book on the top left is a very good starter. It's a lot of the work that Dunn and Raby did at the RCA and a lot of their students. Discursive Design by Bruce Tharp is also a very big textbook and collection of a lot of different projects that span over decades. It's a really beautiful piece of work. Other games you might want to pick up just to kind of maybe play with your colleagues or friends to just get them thinking about and provoking the ideas. The Thing from the Future, you can download that online. Impact, I think you can still get this game. And Superflux Instant Archetypes, that came out, I think, last year. I'm not sure if you can still get it. It was a Kickstarter, but they might be reprinting. I'm not totally sure. And I think I have, oh yeah, in my show. So my response to COVID is I started a podcast. I'm basically the one who posts all of our social media articles, and I always want people to start conversations and discourse around the topics that I'm posting. And sometimes people do, and sometimes people don't. And I was like, well, I'm just going to do it myself. And just to keep myself sane and creative and really just kind of talking and connecting to people, I started the show in May, and we ran it for a couple months, and we're still running it now. We've got a show tonight, actually. And the premise is we ask designers to bring articles they find on the internet, anything they want, and we talk about it for about 45 minutes. And we speculate, we discuss its impact on society, and it's really just a big, it's like a charrette or a cafe talk. If you're with your friends at the cafe, just kind of talking about stuff you've heard. It's very casual and laid back, and sometimes it's silly, and sometimes it's deep and artistic, and it's pretty fun. And so I'm going to leave you with one last statement. This is the theme that we had for Primer 2019 was Futures for All. This is embedded in our DNA and a theme that we're taking up, and it's our mantra. We really do believe in futures for every person, every being on this planet, all life. And we're not there yet. So we are on this mission to bring futures to everyone. So we would love everyone to join us in this and join the community and really think about futures for all.
Thank you very much. So, many thanks, Phil, for a very insightful lecture. Or if I, let's say, quote a little bit from the chat, this was brilliant. In the Q&A session, we will be joined by Ivica Mitrovic. Ivica is an assistant professor at the Department of Visual Communications Design at the Arts Academy in Split, Croatia, where he teaches interaction design and interaction media design. Since 2001, he has been working on the promotion of new design disciplines such as interaction design and critical and speculative design. Together with Oleg Shuran, he was selected as curator for the presentation of the Republic of Croatia at the 21st International Exhibition of the Triennale di Milano. His current focus is developing new and emerging speculative design practices and educational methods as coordinator of the European Erasmus Plus project Speculative Edu. And of course, don't forget, your questions are very much welcome. Please write them in the chat and we will try to answer them during the discussion. So now, Ivica, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Phil, for a very inspiring lecture. As I told you before, I'm following your work for the long time, especially Speculative Futures project, which is one of the most interesting and I think the biggest promotion of the speculative thinking and the speculative practice. So I'm really happy to have a chance to ask you a few questions. I have prepared some stuff. Of course, I have adapted some of the questions during your presentation, because also, which I'm really happy, most of the questions are you already answered during your presentation, but I will start with some of the common questions we are, as speculative design or future thinking practitioners, we are getting every day. And in the present time, where, as you say, and as we see, we are currently living in the speculative or dystopian future, maybe we can say. Climate change, pandemic, fake news, surveillance, and chip in the human brain, and etc., etc. So consequently, some of the critics of the speculative practice, the speculative design practice, states that speculation is dead. So question is then, and something you already answered during the presentation, but let's try to summarize. What is the role of the speculative design or speculative thinking now in this, like, let's say, dystopian present?
I mean, The immediate answer is, like I said earlier, I think a lot of people are trying to speculate on what the next normal is going to look like. So that's sort of the immediate application for it, if you're lucky enough to work with clients or anyone asking it in that context. So that's sort of the first bridge, is how do we avoid the next COVID and future proof. And again, it's a lot of it's about terminology and how people really understand the practice. When you start using words like, this is actually a strategy. We work with a lot of business analysts as well, or I have, and you think about the business analyst strategy where it's a PowerPoint with charts and graphs. Our work is no different, except for we have much cooler artifacts come out of it and then much more robust vision. I mean, I'm not saying that our work is better that way, but those guys do amazing work also, but it's very different what we're doing. And once people see the power of that, and that's why we really promote strategic foresight as being another very core element of using trends and using data. When people can latch onto those pieces of it, they believe it a little bit more. And it's going to take some time, and we need more of those use cases out in the world where this is successful. And then we can point to things, just like Apple, like, a design-centered, design-led company like Apple. Okay, you should do that. They're successful. We see that. We need to see more of that in the world today. And sorry, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but yeah, we believe that it's sort
basically the focus of the question. What is the purpose of the speculative thinking now when we're already living in these so-called dystopian scenarios? How to cope with this, with our approach, with our practice?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose is really just trying to understand what's next. And I don't think, we don't ever say we're predictors of the future. I think that's a dangerous word to say. Speculation is looking at the future, but it's looking at possibilities. But I think it's to help us understand from a design lens also. And that's something that design, I'm going to get myself in trouble by saying design didn't do very well, but it's something that we can use to really understand how we're designing today. It's sort of another part to that toolkit. Design is very good at responding to human needs right away and seeing that. And we can think about the next 2 years, but what about the tools for thinking the next 5 years? We can really help business strategy. I think speculative design can also help business strategies. We don't really think about artifacts and provocations and scenarios as being a core toolkit or a core element when you're thinking about a business strategy, but I think it can be very useful in that aspect as well.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned and you showed some of the frameworks, tools, or maybe diagrams or stuff which could help us how to frame our practice, how to practice speculative thinking. So what do you think? There is lots of discussion from this methodological point of view of the practice. Is it now a mature practice with a really well-defined framework of tools, methods, techniques, or it's a kind of open practice where you can take a tool, methods, or different approach, depend on the project, collaboration, client, context, location of your work, or etc.
Yeah, I would like to say that we are mature enough to have our own double diamond, but we don't. And I'm not saying that the Futures Wheel and Steep are the double diamond to use. These are just the ones that I've been using because they hone in on specific dimensions that can be useful. But when you look at the entire strategic foresight toolkit, it's very, very robust. And it can be very daunting to a designer to look at that and say, what method do I use to figure out what the future world is going to look like? World building alone it can be a very complex practice. So I think we have a little bit of ways to go. And probably when you think about the early days of design thinking, before it was called design thinking, when it was just like research, there's lots of methods for how you might do research. It sort of got repackaged, and I'm not saying that we are repackaging, but you sort of have to reframe it based on how people can understand it as well. But yeah, there's a lot of different tools. I don't think we're mature yet, but I think it's going to take all of us working together. And I see new tools all the time, and I think it's really great. this might not be a practice where we will have a double diamond. The flexibility and malleability of it might be what's powerful about it, is that there is no one size fits all. I mean, even with design thinking, yeah, we've got the journey maps and we've got the personas and there's some staples in there. And maybe that's the futures wheel. But there's lots of other ways you can get to an answer, right? Lots of different methodologies.
From our speculative edu project research and survey, we got the feedback that most of the practitioners and also educators like that situation, that we are not like a fully defined discipline or specialization in the design field, and that is a kind of advantage for especially in the educational field, you know, that you can learn and you can take different tools, methods, approaches, and collaborations based on a different project. But there is also a kind of need for the practitioners and educators to have kind of let's say like a weak or loose framework for doing the practice, and also something we are also discussing what are the measures, how to measure what is a successful project in the speculative future. What is this? Is it the number of people in the audience, number of discussion generating, or number of articles on the websites, or whatever is it, or whatever is it. So this is kind of also discussion we are constantly having inside the practice. One of the also critiques of the speculative practice is that it's separated from the real world. So where do you see the potential of future and speculative thinking practice in generating concrete actions in order to reach different and better futures, and how this could be incorporated into education?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different answers to that. I mean, the measurement aspect is truly a challenge. Just like I was saying with the kids, how do you actually measure that you had a lasting impact on them? We've got to wait a few years to see, once they get into adulthood, did we actually make that? So, and we keep asking this question, and it's been years now, and no one's really understood how can we quantify it? And maybe there isn't really a simple answer for that. Maybe the simple answer is that now that you've actually investigated a lot of other important aspects, like really tying into ethics and social values and transparency, and looking at voices in the margins, and looking at how things can evolve over time. By just incorporating those different aspects, your product or whatever it is that you're building can be that much stronger, and you're more, I guess, ready for things. But then the question is like, well, how do you know what to get ready for? You can look at so many different possibilities in the future. How do you know you're really future-proofing yourself? You don't really. But as long as you have the right intentions and you keep listening to what the signals are saying, hopefully you're doing the right thing. I think there's a lot of commentary right now with some of the social movements that are happening. These are things that need to be incorporated. With the privacy issues, these are aspects that need to be incorporated in your products, and it's going to continue to evolve as we evolve. We're going to find out new things that we need to care about and incorporate. The design of AI, the diversity in AI. Like, we didn't really think about these things because we were very short-sighted, and we didn't realize the impact on people of color or marginalized populations, and like. So these are the exercises that will allow us to open up those conversations and really think about them now, instead of waiting for them to react and respond later, and then potentially causing more issues.
And other part of the question was, is it practice separated from the real world, or there is a strong connection with the real world?
The real world. I'm not sure if I totally understand that question, because I think that's it's practical. Is speculative design practical? Is maybe what the question is revolving around. I don't know how to really answer that. Like I said earlier, a lot of this investigation is really about looking at possibilities in the future. And again, it's all for naught unless you change your strategies in the present. Unless you could do the backcasting method and figure out how do you create a new agenda, but it doesn't mean anything unless you actually do something about it today. Your mindsets change, your strategy, your roadmaps change, you change your culture, you change your values. That's where it can be most powerful. That's the present. The present is actually dreaming of these things and then having it change how you want to live, how the future that you want to walk towards.
Yeah, but also you have showed some of the examples here which are really practical from your business perspective, but also from all this workshop with the kids are really like something connected with the real world. It's not separated from the real world.
Yeah.
So
sure.
there is a question from my audience. I will try to connect with my questions. It's that is like most of the speculative thinking and doing are coming from, let's say, developed Western world, and it's also connected with the topic of your next primary conference. So what is the perspective for educators and practitioners coming from the global south, or even from here? In Slovenia and Croatia, we are basically on the edge of the Europe. We are remote from the big urban areas of the Western Europe. We are not having chance to deal with like big topics, or like we are not there to deal with like hot and new emerging technologies in our micro local level. So basically, who is owning the future, or how to make this practice more inclusive?
Yeah, and that's part of our mission. We are now in Africa. We do have some cities in the global south. We're in a couple cities in India. And I think part of the answer to that is that we need to continue to democratize it and continue to, this is not, and this part of the original mission was, let's get it out of academia, which it was very popularized in higher education, and make it practical. The kids program is one of those intents. I would say everyone needs to be practicing that. It doesn't even matter if you're a chapter in our community, like that doesn't matter. As long as you've learned about this and you can apply it to something there, you can see how flexible it is. It's not just about future products, or AI. It doesn't have to be about emerging technologies. And yeah, and a lot of the examples I showed, and that's sort of the problem with a lot of speculative work, is it's talking about emerging technologies. I think even my bio said something about the ethics around emerging technologies. It can be about anything. And my dream and vision is really that we reach all corners of the planet. It doesn't have to be through DFI, that people in some of the most remote areas have a futures mindset. If there's anything that we could spread out there, it's the mindset of really looking into possibilities, being positive, and having enough resources. And I'm not talking about physical resources, but like critical resources to understand, how do I change that future or build towards that future? If we can teach every child that and make it part of early curriculum so they have that long-term thinking, I mean, I feel like we'd all be in a much better place.
I have also like I lots of discuss about like different possibilities, like, and recently I had a lecture for the some university in India, and they were really like interesting in this like speculative thinking and all this critical thinking and stuff. And I got the questions from one of the professors there. It's all great, but like most of our students, they need just skills, skills to survive on the market. Skills they will need to survive in their future, like post university life. And so for us, it's really hard to balance, this like level of like teaching skills and prepare them for the real life, and and put them like and bring them critical thinking and to be reflexive about the design stuff and all this like values we are promoting via our approach. So it's quite a hard task also for us here in let's say South East Europe, where there is like few levels of education, or few levels of a few steps we need to do. First, we have to move students from this like traditional design, market-based and market-oriented design. Then we have to give them, skills for the critical thinking, and also to teach them how to be reflective. And the third stuff, we have to find the way how they could like move all these scenarios and stuff to the real world action. So it's a really kind of complex task for us educators, especially in the countries which is not part of like a big university. Even in the really developed countries, if you are not in really like a traditional art school where everything is open, then it's really hard to teach some of this practice also on this like more technical based or more like business based universities which are quite closed for any kind of teaching which is not just like a skills for the market. So I think the stuff you're doing with the primer, it's very interesting because you are really highly connected with the business world, which is lots of time missing it's missing at this more academic level of doing and thinking about speculative practice. Barbara, maybe we can, if you have comment, Phil, or we can open like time for some questions from the audience.
That's right, because we got quite a lot of them and a very interesting one. So I hope we will have the time to answer them all. But yeah, the first one was, how to remain present when working on something that is about the future?
Remain present as in thinking about the present?
Well, maybe, yeah,
or
answer.
Or be positive about.
Maybe we can unmute the one who wrote the question if they are still with us, so that they can. Okay, we don't hear you. Can you just unmute yourself? Can you do this? No?
No, I think
no? I'll ask to unmute, okay.
Yeah, I think they have to be unmuted.
Okay, yes. Hi.
Hi.
What I meant was that how do you remain present, as in how do you remain in the moment of now, and how to link, kind of like come back from the future to the present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and that's, so I'm always thinking about the future. I mean, everyone's always thinking about the future. Like if it's just like, it's like planning a trip, right? If you're planning a vacation somewhere, you're always thinking about all the logistics and all of the issues, and you're doing risk management as well. And that's literally how I live my life. And you might call me paranoid or overthinking things, but I literally think about that. Like what's the impact and implication if I actually go down this path, and what are the different potential possibilities, positive and negative. And sometimes it does get a little bit crazy, I guess, when you're always thinking about all of these different scenarios, but I've gotten used to it, and it's helped me to kind of navigate things. And you have to just stay optimistic. No matter how many different possibilities you think of, try to be optimistic and always have your heart in the right direction. Even though if you know there are potential negative outcomes, always know that place that it's coming from. And if you can actually, exude that positivity into your life today and your future thinking, it will eventually radiate from there as well. I don't know, that might sound like a very philosophical or esoteric answer, but that's literally what we have manifested working with the UN. Like by doing all this stuff, not caring what anyone says, what anyone thinks, just saying, we need to do this. It matters. We don't know how we're going to do it, or we don't know how we're going to frame it, but we're going to do it. And it makes sense. And it's going to be a little bit messy, but I think a lot of people also believe it. And we've got this platform, and let's all figure it out together. And I think other people understand that there's a problem to be solved. We haven't solved it, but we think collectively we can.
To ask a quick follow-up question is that how do you remain content and mindful? Like, how do you not get so overwhelmed by thinking about and changing the things for the future? It's
very difficult. I'm not going to lie, it's very difficult. And I struggle with it. I mean, I had to start that show because I really was getting depressed. No one saw this coming. If we were such experts on the future, why didn't somebody predict COVID? And I'm sure somebody did, but no one listened, this and that. But no one saw it coming. And the impact, the long-lasting impact, is something no one really totally, fully understands either. That's why we need to be here today to help guide that discussion collaboratively. We're not going to be the expert on this either.
There was lots of so-called, like weak signals, which was like showing maybe that something like this is going to happen. So at the moment we have like more than like millions weak signals that, you know, climate change is coming. So basically we know that it's coming. So, but you know that there's a problem also of the questions we already had, who own the future, who have empowered to change the future. So that's, that is the main question.
And hopefully now this time that we're in will make us, you know, be a little bit more mindful of that and think about climate change and think about potential viruses and think about our family lives and the money that we spend and the fuel that we burn and all of that stuff. My biggest fear is that we're not going to learn a lesson. We're going to get a vaccine and it's going to go right back to the same way. And that's me being pessimistic, but that's why we need to collectively really think about this together. The longer this persists, the more hopefully it impacts us and brings us into that mode.
I feel the same way. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will, the next question was in a way included with Ivica already, so I will skip it and I will go to the third one. How do organizations use speculative design today? Are they setting up Foresight or speculative design departments?
Some of them are. I know that, you know, Microsoft had a futures division. I think it's been disbanded since then. A lot of design communities, and from what I've heard from companies like IBM and IDEO, have their own sort of small. We have a futures tribe at McKinsey. We've built a tribe, and we are actively building out documentation, trying to figure out how do we package this into offerings for our clients, and we're building that practice now. And a lot of people are doing it on their own. Some companies, they have like a sort of speculative division. They're not very big. And sort of back to Ivica's question, we're still in the very early stages of it. If you can think of where service design was maybe like 10 years ago, it's kind of in the same area, or where design thinking was in the 90s. We're in that very first places where the speculative design position at a job, that job does not totally exist yet. Though there are people that practice it, it's sort of in the designer's hands right now. And it's sort of a tool that the designers have. There are futurists and there are people who are doing this, both at small boutiques, independently, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. So the next question is from Rob Collins. Speculative design often imagines either dystopias or commercial opportunities. Is there a movement towards imagining utopias again?
There is.
The different cultures speculate in different ways. Yes,
absolutely. The submissions for featuring piece were so beautiful, and I hope that we get to share those with the world at some point. But we received submissions from all over the world, and some of them were, you know, and we said it doesn't need to be some polished 3D rendering and video, whatever. We were interested in ideas, and I think this is something we really want to continue to promote, that you don't need to be a trained Foresight practitioner or designer and go to a university. You can speculate on anything and come up with a strong idea. And there are some that didn't even come with an illustration, but just had a very powerful message, a very powerful approach. Sorry, I sort of lost track by your question, but yeah, it's practiced in a lot of different ways. And I don't think that there's one like certification, even though we've got our program, like there's no like real, I don't know, certification for what you call a speculative designer in the world today.
If I could add, there is true. There is a big critique of the speculative practice that at some point, like the most of the, or no, let's say not let's say the most, but like this dystopian thinking was, or dystopian scenarios was became kind of trend, which was like a really threat for the practice. But there is a lots of critiques outside the practice and inside the practice, I think, which really helps for the practice to keep like this direction, like in more inclusive or more open direction. And there is importance to see like different cultures, because also one of the critiques of the practice is that coming from this Western privileged position of white men, you know, like thinking about future and thinking about future in a very modernistic way of thinking. And I think opening the practice for the different cultural approaches, even very radical one, it's also very important. But it's not only for the speculative design, but the design in general.
Yeah, I would say, and sorry if people get that idea that it's sort of for the privileged. That's the one thing we are not about. And even we've gotten criticism that we only serve the U.S. and Europe because we have primary U.S. and primary Europe. We actually want to have primary Asia and South America and China and maybe other regions also. We want to continue to do that. And as far as the utopia question, yes, there is quite a big movement to get away from dystopic film and dystopic literature and really think about what does the utopia mean. So it is happening. We're starting to see that more. We need it. We need it right now. That's really, I feel like in the next year or so, we're going to see a lot more of that type of work.
Okay, so we have the following question. Many things that have been designed as solutions to problems in the past have had unexpected and negative consequences. How do you ensure that this isn't happening when you're designing speculative futures? Also, how do you ensure everyone is being included in the futures you're designing?
That's a good question. And that's sort of the mission as well. I'm sort of embarking on a side project around policy, the design of policy, the terms and conditions, if you will, around our products and services. How do you involve people earlier in that discussion? There's work to be done there. There's a lot of work to figure out who is at the margins, who is actually marginalized. And I think it's really up to us to define what's that checklist and how do we actually investigate that. I don't have an answer for you, but I'm with you, and that's another investigation wrapped around the idea of policy making, because that's where how policies are created, right? Thinking about the people who are using these things, starting with who is it, and who's going to adopt it. But we're never going to get it right. We're always going to be blindsided, no matter how many futures wheels we do. And that's why we need to be flexible and also have that mindset that we are doing the best we can to be inclusive and diverse now. And we accept that there might be failure, and we will react to that failure and continue to think proactively and diversely.
And one of the answers is also, if you compare with the traditional design practice, speculative practice, it's more connected with opening discussion, trying to imagine different possible scenarios using, for example, some technology, not like providing like market-based final ultimate solution. So this is one of the answer that most of the practice just trying to speculate what is going to be like outcomes or implications of the technology. That's one of the that is the answer on this like first question. So thinking about possibilities, not providing like a final solution or something which could in future make lots of troubles and problems, which at the end we are going to fix with new technologies and creating another loop.
Yeah.
Sarah had also the follow-up to the question that you answered before, and she said that or how do we hold speculative designers accountable for ensuring the futures they're designing for are not for the default, let's say, she put it in this, white class, middle class, as has been done before?
How do we hold speculative designers accountable for the work they're doing and also not? Yeah,
designing it for the middle class, white.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of other components to the process is indicator monitoring, and this is something that they do regularly in Foresight, where as you start to deploy whatever your strategy is, you don't just say, okay, I did the future, I created the backcasting plan, and then there you go, and it's off and running. You have to constantly, and this is where transition design will come into play as well. If you're not familiar with transition design, there's a lot of papers out there on that, systematically thinking about what's the transition between the now and that future, and how do you continue to kind of nurture it along the way, along the path. So futures is not just a one-time exercise. It's a constant process that you need to continue to monitor the signals in the world and constantly adjust based on what's happening. Because again, you're not gonna have all the answers. You have to constantly be molding that. But that's that practice, the mindset, always looking ahead and changing your agenda and your strategy based on what you're seeing is sort of where we want to get to.
If I could say from my personal perspective, we do lots of projects at the local level with the people you know in very like micro situations, and I think what is really nice for me, that speculative approach, I call it most of the time approach. It's not like as I said before, it's not like a closed discipline with the methods and tools. So we just take this approach and adapt it in the local cultural, geographical level, and do the stuff with the local people, and that is maybe one of the answers to this like privileged situation of how to include everyone. I don't think that it's possible to have a kind of one design which is like for everyone. So doing like lots of local stuff with the local people, and also I see collaboration with the participatory design which is including like people with the designers from the beginning. I think it's also important, but it's work on the small scale. It really works.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Now we have Tamara. She's a bit critical, I must say. She said, I feel like speculative design is mostly used in academic or artistic ways. But if speculative designers are the ones who have the possibilities to look further, to imagine future, don't they or we have some kind of responsibility to use that ability in the real world? Commercial projects and products will always come up. Why do designers only criticize them and not working in the business world and influence the future of things which are actually coming? But you actually
Phil answered during the presentation.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
yeah, and I'm sorry. And again, I'm sorry. I do not mean to give the impression that this is only valuable or applicable in the business world. And I love that you guys are asking these questions, because it's not. And I wish I could show you more examples of the work that we see. And go to our Vimeo page and look at some of the work that people are speaking about at Primer. It's not just in that, but again, I work for one of the largest consultancies in the world, and I sort of chose to go there because I felt, what happens if I can actually see what these businesses are doing? These businesses that are kind of running a lot of systems in the world. What if we could change their mindset? What if we could introduce this to them and make them think a little bit more responsibly and holistically about what they're doing? And again, it's not an easy task, but I believe it's possible, and I'm going to die on my sword if I have to do that. And I might give up, and maybe I'll work with an NGO, and who knows? But I think it's worth the battle there. But it's also worth doing it everywhere. And I think we need everyone's help. Please do not. If there's anything you take away from this, this is not a privileged Western white-only discipline. It is not by any means, and that's part of our mission. Is that it's not, and we need to all be practicing this. It's a mindset that we need to infect well, maybe that's the worst word to say, but it's a mindset I think that everyone needs to try and at least consider. You don't have to fully adopt it, but consider parts of it. Consider the value that it can bring by just, changing a child's life. Like, that's not, we're just doing workshops with them, but can you imagine the opportunity if we change their life? Can you imagine what they're able to do if they start to adopt this? It's huge.
Phil, this is connected with one of my favorite questions. So I'll ask my colleagues, like, let's say that speculative design is a kind of avant-garde or avant-garde practice. So what is the way or how to avoid that speculative practice, as most of this avant-garde practice in design and art and also in economy, how to avoid to be like appropriate by the system? It's really one of the most difficult questions I always ask.
Well, there's the problem in itself. The examples that you see in the world are what people believe is it's representing. It doesn't have to. That's why everyone needs to create examples that we can talk about. I want more examples in my presentation that shows it's not just about that. It's not just about business. It's not about money or capitalism, or it's really about, again, it's a tool. And if we can all work together to create those examples and come to Primer, do it wherever you live, create your project. And I will, believe me, our process for selecting applications is very non-biased. We do blind judging, and we look really for the quality of the work and the diversity and the articulation of it as well. But we're looking for as many projects as we can, representing many different regions. So get the work out there. Use our platform to promote that work and show the world that it's very diverse. We won't be able to get away entirely from these avant-garde and conceptual projects, things that are, that are almost art objects or considered art objects. That'll exist, and that stuff is great also. There's nothing wrong with it, but we also need the other projects, and we need to make impact. And you shouldn't give up. Speculation is just not, just do it and make impact, and really show what that impact looks like. Help us figure out how to measure and quantify this.
Thank you. We have another question. What values do you think global corporations are lacking today in their approach to dealing with the pandemic? Can you name any global organizations that you think could really benefit from futurist design thinking right now?
The World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations. We're about to work with UNESCO. I mean, applying futurist thinking to world peace. I mean, that sounds like such a big topic, right? It's the wish you want from the genie in the bottle. What's the one thing you would solve? World peace. Let's stop war. But here is the opportunity. And granted, we did it through competition, but the UN DPPA is very serious about, if they get an idea and they want to actually activate it and execute it and invest in it, they are going to do that. That's how serious they are. And what a great opportunity that is. I would apply it at some of the biggest wicked problems that we could find. Working with people with natural disasters, that's what we're looking for. What about the people in prisons? People who are really challenged, all of the at-risk populations that are out there, I would find as many as we can and work on those problems. Any NGO, any nonprofit who's really solving the big issues that the big businesses might not want to invest in, let's do that. Let's fill those gaps in.
I think you have 2 more questions. How to design for future platforms, how to adjust to all the smart tech around us and stay human, and at the same time, be innovative and keep on developing products that actually solve our problems, which we haven't even addressed yet.
The problems that we haven't addressed yet. Well, we don't know what we don't know just yet. And that's the problem with not really knowing the full implications of everything we're doing. And we're never going to know everything. But if everyone starts thinking this way, maybe we'll at least have a much greater map. And then it's going to be about prioritization of like, which of these blind spots are we going to care about? So there is no easy answer to that. I think it's just about everyone doing the work and really considering what the issues are. And there's going to be a prioritization based on, our values and priorities. And sometimes it'll be, business oriented. Hopefully it will be more social oriented. And that's what I'd love to see in the future.
So we have a question from student of speculative design here. And the question is, I often see projects that seem to seek a refuge in not promoting a future, but only speculating about it. At the same time, we are in need for urgent solutions facing multiple crises at the same time, as she said, or he said, sorry. As soon as people start to formulate concrete visions, however, they also become attackable. Why is there always a side taking between speculative versus real designers? Shouldn't we all collaborate? Isn't implementation the next step of speculation?
Yes, absolutely it is. And I wouldn't categorize speculation as like, it's only a future thing. There's a great article by Cameron Tonkin-Wise called Just Design. And anything that's beyond literally 24 hours from now is speculation to some degree. You speculate about your products. You don't actually know if it's going to work. Everything is sort of, or you're already practicing that mindset today. So I wouldn't consider them differently. And what we're seeing a lot of are these hybrid solutions where we're companies looking for They want to understand the next 3 years or so, or the next, like I said, like with the patient experience one, the next 6 to 18 months. That's not super future. Some people think that strategic foresight and futures only happens at 5 to 10 years beyond. And I don't think that's true. I think we can use implication mapping and trend analysis to look at the next 2 years. We can look at it for the next 6 months. Now, it's not as provocative or compelling of like, the big future thing that'll really future-proof us, but you can use those tools now. And I think how it's going to work is there's going to be a lot of this hybrid thinking where it's we're using the same tools and we're still speculating about the immediate tomorrow with those same tools. And maybe that's our road there. Maybe it's not this like adopt everything as we've been doing it. It's a lot of collaborative and compromise as well.
Phil, if
So
you have
Phil,
energy, if you have energy for one last.
Yes, I can just addition to this, like Phil answered for Sophie. Yes, for Sophie. It's the biggest problem is that most of the design schools are still teaching so-called design myths, and James Auger talks about these design myths, which is like design is good, design is helping people, and design is solving the problems, which is like really design myths now. And the values which are incorporated in the speculative design are basically values which all design schools should practice and should be based on. So that is the big problem, that is still most of the schools are very traditional, based on this modernistic notion of design, which is like connected with the market, connected with the industrial production, without like lots of reflection, where design is just a kind of service for the industry and for the technology. And this kind of these values we are talking about here, they are not incorporated in the let's say mainstream design education. And when this kind of stuff we are talking here became a mainstream design education, I think that could be like really like a big step forward, like different design which is more inclusive, reflexive, which is dealing with decolonialization of design, which is dealing with all these like values we are talking here. And that is the problem for us. And as you said here, of course, that the next step it's like implementation, or let's say generating action, which is like this like a third step of this like educational process, which is very complex and very hard, because like our community, it's really small community. It looks big, but it's really small community if you compare it with all these design schools around, especially like these small schools which are more connected with the local business production and stuff, which is really like less and critical than it should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, my general, these are all really great questions, and I've had these discussions many times over the years, and I feel like we're sort of slowly chipping away at it. And I think again, it's collaborative effort. But what I would think, and this is how I've been living, is like, yeah, I've doubted the value, applicability, the longevity of this. Is this really the next evolution of design? Are designers really going to adopt this? It's been a lot of selling. I've been doing a lot, but look what's happening. I mean, just look at everything that's happening around, not just our growth of our community, but look at the impact of the pandemic. Look at all the places we could be using it. I would just say, just try and figure out the measurement. Just try and practice it, reformat it, reframe it, repackage it, do whatever you can and see if you can make it work. And sometimes there's a compromise and sometimes not, and just keep doing that experimentation. And I think that what the future of what we hope and want won't look the way we think it's going to look. I think there's going to be a lot of changes along the way that we will not expect. It's going to surprise us in how we make it work, but I think we can make it work.
I think that with this last comment, you actually answered the last question, which was a follow-up question, how to establish a viable practice with speculative design as a freshly graduate student. In a way, you already answered it, but would you like to add something to it? Yeah, I mean, again, and I'm going to be very realistic with you here. Don't expect to leave graduate school or your undergrad and become a speculative designer and you're going to,
make a ton of money or whatever it is you want to achieve with that. You could definitely change the world, but I think, you know, you might have to come out and be a designer with a strategic toolkit that looks near and far. And that might be a strength for now. And then soon these job roles will start to emerge, as they are starting to slowly. But I think that's what the future is going to be. It's just going to be like much stronger, more well-rounded designers that have that in their toolkit. But as far as advice, I would, again, you could sit around and say, I'm waiting for the speculative design job to open at the UN. And that's the one I'm gonna get. And great, that would be great if that actually happened. But you need to get into the system and start to work the system and really teach that practice. Go find a job wherever you can that has the openness to think about strategic thinking, that they trust you, they believe in you, and then slowly teach them that. Do the newsletter, do the free, cheap, and easy thing, have a lunch and learn, you know, do a presentation and show them, and just kind of really get them on board.
I think this is a great conclusion. Thank you very much, Phil and Ivica, for a great discussion. Thank you all for joining in. I will wrap up with a quote by American playwright John Gare from his play Landscape of the Body. It's amazing how little tomorrow can make up for a whole lot of yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.